1976, Alex Haley published a book, Roots, a saga of an American family, that started a popular movement among African Americans for searching their genetic roots in Africa. To discover one's ancestors soon became a popular theme for all Americans, and it is growing in popularity in many other countries. Currently, the Institution of African Ancestry uses modern genetic methods for tracing the ancestors of anybody who is interested in searching for his or her genetic past. That includes not only a few past generations, but can also trace the individual's genetic river tens of thousands of years back.
The mission is to transform the way people view themselves, and we do that using DNA. Our process is one that uses DNA to determine what part of the world a person shares ancestry with. Tell someone where their maternal ancestry was anywhere from 500 to 10,000 years ago. We can also do that for paternal ancestry. And so it's a very exciting time that we're able to use technology to answer the question of where am I from?
A couple years ago, and I'm not really quite sure when, but the idea of looking at deep ancestry came up. And here we're talking about the same thing, Y chromosome testing, but also added what is called mitochondrial testing. And this is DNA testing to look and see, for instance, where your ancestors were thousands of years ago. Because we know that man originated in Africa. And we know that they moved, humans moved out of Africa and spread throughout Asia, Australia, Europe, and then eventually North and South America. And as humans left Africa, their DNA would change periodically. Once that change occurs, it's permanent. So you can analyze someone's DNA, for instance, the Y chromosome or the mitochondrial DNA, look for these changes in the bases, and track man's progress back to Africa.
The majority of the people that take our tests are African Americans. However, we've had people from all over the world use our service to trace their ancestry. And what's interesting is that while most of the time we find African ancestry, sometimes we don't find African ancestry. There was a gentleman who took our test in Pittsburgh and actually traced his paternal line to China. And he was an African-American man, never thought he had any Chinese ancestry. And so we were a little alarmed, you know, we thought, how are we gonna, he's not gonna believe us, this is completely out of left field. But when he got the results, he actually was quite calm and started to think about how he had studied Eastern religions his entire life. His home was decorated in, with all kinds of Asian influences. He even named his daughter China. And, you know, didn't know why he was drawn to this culture. And so perhaps that cellular memory that we talk about influenced the way he viewed the world. The process of tracing ancestry is pretty straightforward. We each inherit 50% of our DNA from our mother and 50% from our father.
In addition, there is another kind of molecule, a special molecule called mitochondrial DNA, that is transmitted only from the mother to her descendants, boys or girls. Thus, the mother is a very important link to determine the long and complicated lines of where our ancestors came from.
What we do is we look at that mitochondrial DNA because, quite like a census record or marriage records or birth records, it gives us some information about your maternal line. And so we unlock the code, if you will, of that DNA to determine ancestry.
To make things even more intriguing, an exclusive father-son line of inheritance is carried by one component of the DNA called the Y chromosome. This tells us exclusively about the male lineage of the human genetic river.
There's a lot of interesting things that have sort of fallen out. For instance, the Genghis Khan, and they found that certain changes in the Y chromosome were found very frequently in males throughout Asia. And they believe that it was based on the fact that Genghis Khan fathered a lot of sons, who then fathered a lot more sons. If you want to know that if you're distantly related to Genghis Khan, you can submit your DNA testing and they will tell you.
The Jewish history tells us about the priestly tradition of Cohen as descendants of Aaron, or Aharon HaKohen, the older brother of Moses. About 3,000 years ago, he was designated as the high priest in the Temple of Solomon. Cohen is a Hebraic singular for priest. Genetic studies of the male line of descendants of the Kohanim, Cohen, have confirmed that indeed there is what could be called a Cohen gene that is found in the Ashkenazi as well as Sephardic lineages and transmitted along the father-son genetic line. Thus, the inherited priestly tradition is written, or should we say confirmed, in the lineage by the DNA inheritance.